Hello and welcome to our last week of emergency remote learning. Today we are looking at the rise of the religious right. And just a quick definition for you, when we talk about the religious right, what we mean are a group of people who are theologically conservative. So on our left-right spectrum, we talked about theologically, they're on the right side of that spectrum, as well as being politically conservative and affiliated with the Republican Party. As we'll see, it's quite possible to be theologically conservative, so on the right part of the theological spectrum, but be politically moderate or liberal, more to the left of the political spectrum. So again, when we talk about the religious right, we're talking about a group of people in the United States who are theologically conservative, who are politically conservative, and who are identified with the Republican Party. Here's where we're going. Historically, we'll see that the religious right was a response to perceived threats to religion and the Christian nation, or the idea here that the religious foundation of the nation, or what they take to be the religious foundation of the nation, is under threat. Theologically, we'll see that the religious right raised questions about how God ordered creation and whether law has any authority if not grounded in God. You see more of that probably in your reading than we'll necessarily talk about, but we will touch on that and help give some context to what you're seeing in your readings. I want to start then with two maps that I hope will help you understand the change that we're looking at here. These are two maps. One is from 1918, right here, and one is from 2012. You'll see I found my little clicker, so this will be fun. And these are the results from House of Representative elections. So we have our familiar red and blue, so red states, blue states, or red areas, blue areas. And I want you to just look at these maps real quick and see what you notice. They are different. And look what we have here in the American South. It is blue, completely blue. And then we have a lot of red up here in Washington and Oregon, a lot of red up here in New England. Contrast that with what we see in 2012, where we have some blue still in the South, but largely a red area. We have blue here along the West Coast, blue up in the New England, New York area. It's changed pretty radically. So one of the things we're going to look at is how religion played into a realignment in American politics that changed voting patterns and changed party affiliation very dramatically over the course of the 20th century. Here's something else I want you to look at because it's a part of the story as well. Here we have listed a group of churches, and then the extent to which they lean Republican or Democrat. And what you can see here is that they go from leaning heavily Republican here to the bottom where they lean heavily Democrat. And what I want you to just notice is over on the side here, they talk about some of these as evangelicals, those people we've talked about. These are all the Church of the Nazarene, the Southern Baptist Convention, the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, not to be mistaken for the ELCA. These are evangelical churches that are majority, not completely, but majority white. And they lean heavily Republican. These churches down at the bottom, the Church of God in Christ, the National Baptist Convention, and the African Methodist Episcopal Church, are historically black churches who in many ways theologically are not hugely different from some of these. They would have a lot of theological similarities, but their political leanings are very different. So part of the story we're going to tell is a story about how white evangelicals over the course of the 20th century became identified with the Republican Party, and how black Christians became identified with the Democratic Party. Finally, one other thing that this is hopefully going to try and help us make sense of, this chart of approval ratings for President Trump as of January 2019. So again, I'm going to just focus here on two pieces of this chart. White evangelicals approving of the president, upwards of 70%. That might actually be low. And then black Protestants here, 12% approving of the president, which almost seems high. But in either case, a huge difference between two groups of people who, in terms of theological beliefs, aren't necessarily all that different, but who, in terms of political affiliation, are vastly different. So here are the questions we're looking at. Why the changes in voting patterns? And why do white evangelicals and black Protestants who have similar theological beliefs vote so differently? Finally, as we keep going forward, keep in mind two realignments, two ways that people begin to regroup themselves over the course of the 20th century. One is a religious realignment. Over the course of the 20th century, whether someone identifies as religiously conservative or religiously liberal becomes more important in many ways than their denominational identity. This is particularly true of Protestants, but it has some analogs in Catholicism and in other religious traditions as well. So over the course of the 20th century, it becomes more telling whether someone says I'm religiously conservative than it does if they say I'm Baptist or I'm Presbyterian. Another way of saying that is people who identify as theologically liberal, who are, say, Presbyterian and Lutheran, will have more in common with each other than, say, a conservative liberal and a conservative Lutheran and a liberal Lutheran would have. The other realignment is political. The solid white Democratic South becomes solidly Republican, and the Republican Party becomes more Southern over the course of the 20th century. That, too, is a very significant realignment that hopefully by the end of it will help make sense of those various charts and maps that we saw at the beginning.